classic white skirts are all the rage right now for spring fashion, so obviously I need to figure out how I can make myself my own version. So I'm gonna take you along and you can make your own too. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel and happy spring wherever you are. Here in Wisconsin, we were kind of getting spring weather and then it snowed yesterday. Now it's melting, but anyways, I'm fully embracing that spring is right around the corner and I'm ready for all of that, including ready for all things spring fashion, which brings me to today's video. If you exist anywhere on social media, especially if you follow people who are very into fashion, if you follow sewists, you've probably started to see a ton of people embracing these beautiful classic white midi skirts. There are so many different variations that I have seen. Ever since seeing all of these gorgeous like white midi skirts on social media, I have wanted to make my own, and so I started kind of brainstorming what kind of shape and style I would want to make, and I kind of came up with this really pretty style in my head. And then I realized that DOEN, the brand DOEN, literally had the skirt that I saw and was visualizing and playing around with in my head. This is what it looks like. It is so beautiful. I love the length, that it's a midi length. I love all of the tucks and folds and then the little kind of eyelet detail at the bottom. What I think the reason that I really like this is it's kind of giving like Edwardian 1800s, but styled in a very modern way, which I obviously love. I kind of love the ode to classic vintage historical fashion, but then reimagined in new ways. And so obviously, after taking the vision in my head of the skirt I wanted to make and seeing this one, we are going to attempt to make this white DOEN midi skirt for spring. If you've been following along on my channel for any amount of time, you know that I love a good designer dupe. One of the main reasons that I love to sew is taking my skills for sewing, seeing something that I love online or in a store, and making a more affordable version of that simply using my sewing skills. And this DOEN skirt, we're gonna check online to see how much it is. Obviously out of my budget, it is $228, which a lot of people would probably complain about, that high price tag. I would have to do a little bit of research, but I'm pretty sure that DOEN is a fairly ethical brand in regards to their workers, where their items are made, and that price point honestly tells me that the people making their clothes are probably getting paid a fair wage, hopefully. And given what I know about pricing fashion, it's kind of a fair price point, but not what I want to pay. I can tell that this is a very high quality skirt, so that price point really does not shock me all that much. It's also a very popular skirt because it's completely sold out on their Instagram shop, and I'm pretty sure it's sold out online as well. So I'm going to show you how you can make your own today. I think we're going to make some adaptations a little bit to the skirt, but for the most part we're going to try to stay as true to it as possible, especially because I just love the shape and silhouette and it already kind of fit this vision that I had in my brain. Also, you all know that I love a good thrifted sheet. So obviously for this project, we are going to be using a white thrifted sheet. So again, this project is probably going to come out to about $8, and it's probably going to look hopefully as close to the original designer skirt as we can get. So without further ado, let's dive in to creating the most perfect and dreamy white spring skirt. Okay, so we're gonna start cutting out the skirt here in a minute, but I was thinking about this specific skirt style, and I don't remember if I mentioned it in the beginning, but one of the reasons why I love this specific skirt style was like the tucks and like the kind of eyelety lace at the bottom is that it is very old-fashioned and it reminds me of like a Victorian petticoat. Like you could honestly probably get it like a Victorian petticoat off of Etsy and just wear it as one of these skirts. So that's kind of, again, like the vibe that we're going for, a lot of this historical inspiration, which is why I love all of the details in this skirt because it's just so unique. So anyways, let's dive into all the crazy mathematical stuff that goes into figuring out how long we need to make this skirt, how you're gonna make it fit you, and the adaptations based on all the details. All right, so here's all of the crazy math for this skirt, and I promise it's actually not as intimidating as it looks. But I was trying to figure out, based on the finished length of the bottom of the skirt and the top of the skirt, how much I would need to add in length to both of those sections to do the little tucks, and then also figuring out the width I would want this skirt to be. So the only personal adaptation you are going to make in creating the skirt in this pattern is to take your hip measurement. I put the waist, but it's actually supposed to be your hips. So you're going to take the circumference of your hips, so all the way around from back to front, take that circumference and you're going to add 6 inches for it. That's going to essentially be the circumference and the width of this top section.
Okay, Editing Madison here, just popping in because as you watch this video, you are going to see that I actually make some tweaks along the way. In regards to the measurements, you will know that sometimes my sewing projects and my sewing tutorials are like trial and error because that's just how I sew and how I tend to teach is by trial and error. So I did make some adaptations to the hip measurement. In this video, you're going to see that I tell you to add 6 inches to your hip circumference. As I progressed in the video, I realized that I actually need a little bit more space, and so I ended up adding 9 inches. I will post the updated measurements and mathematical formulas right here in this video, so you can kind of take a screenshot of it and have that to apply for yourself. Outside of that, everything else is pretty much the same except for shifting some of the tucks up as I make the measurements and the markings for them, but you will also see that in the video. So let's continue on.
You're going to divide that in half because you're going to have 2 pieces. You're going to have a front and a back. Now, depending on what your hip circumference is, you might have to adapt the width of the bottom tier. Right now it's set at being 40 inches wide. In total with the front and the back, it's going to be 80 inches all the way around. So just keep that in mind. But you're going to take your hip circumference, you are going to add 6 inches to that, and then you're going to cut that in half. So for my skirt, the top section of my skirt, I'm going to have 2 21.5 inch width sections that are going to be like a rectangular shape. Now the length for this top section is going to end up being 12.5 inches. The reason why it's 12.5 is that my finished length, I want it to be 10.5 inches. I need to add 2 extra inches to do 2 half-inch little tucks that are going to be the details up here from the original dress. I'm only doing 2 instead of like 4 or 5 like the original dress. So the top tier is going to end up being 12.5 inches in length, and that also takes into account the waistband. The bottom tier in total is going to be 33 inches long. Once it's sewn, it's going to come out to be about 22 inches, but it needs to be 33 inches long because we are going to do 3 different tucks that are going to be different measurements. The bottom tuck is going to be 2.5 inches wide. The next tuck above that is going to be 2 inches. The first one's 2.5, next one's 2, and then a 1 inch. So in total, we are going to need to add 11 inches to this 22 inches, therefore having a 33 inch total length. All right, so in total, these are going to be the pieces I'm going to need to cut out for my skirt. I'm going to cut out 2 pieces for my top tier that are going to be 21.5 inches wide and 12.5 inches long. I'm cutting 2 of those rectangle pieces. My bottom tier, I also need to cut 2 rectangular / square pieces. These are going to be 40 inches wide by 33 inches long. So let's go cut that out. All right, so I've cut out all of my pieces. I have my 2 pieces for the bottom tier of my skirt, and then this is going to be for the top kind of waist and hip section. I'm going to figure out the measurements for where I want all my tucks to be and draw lines, and then we will start sewing it together. Okay, so I have drawn out all my lines for my tucks. It might be hard to see, it's the very faint blue lines. For my bottom tuck, it's going to be 2.5 inches. The next one is going to be 4 inches. And then the very top one is going to be a 1 inch tuck. So you obviously double what your tuck is going to be for the surface area, because it's going to be folded in half, sewn and tucked. So my first section, I put about 1 inch up from the bottom, and this is going to be 5 inches tall all the way across. So I drew 2 lines. Then I have a 2.5 inch space between my next one And this one is going to be 4 inches tall between the 2 lines because my tuck is going to be 2 inches. And then I have a 1.5 inch space. And then my next tuck is going to be 1 inch. So the idea is that there's going to be 1/2 inch between every tuck. Therefore, that's why I have 2.5 inches and then 1.5 inches between my tucks. So this part is kind of hard to try and explain on camera, but that's the best I'm doing. Is you're drawing your lines, and essentially these lines are markings that are going to help you mark up the lines, pin them together, and so pin these together, and so pin this together, and so, and they overlap to create the tuck. So you'll start to see it as we start to construct it. I have to go and transfer these lines to the back piece of the skirt, and then we're going to do the same for the top tier. Alright, I have finished transferring all of my tuck lines to the back of my bottom skirt panel, and if you're wondering and a little worried why I'm using a blue pin on white fabric, this is my magic pin. I love using this for fabric marking. It's one of the friction erasable pins, so if you used it on paper, you could erase it. The great thing about this for sewing is that it disappears with heat. So after I sew anything, wherever I've used this, all I have to do is iron it and it will disappear. So it's way better than the pins that disappear with just air and water. So highly recommend friction pins as your new fabric marking tool. Alright, so this is the top tier of the skirt, which only has 2 tucks that are each 1/2 inch once they're sewn. I put the first tuck 1 inch from the bottom, and then the width of that tuck is going to be 1 inch because then you fold it in half, so it's 1/2 inch. Then I made this space between them about 3/4 of an inch, and then the tuck above it also 1 inch because it's going to be 1/2 inch, and I transferred that onto both sides of the top section of the skirt. So now we're going to take the top section of the skirt and the bottom section, we're going to sew the side seams right sides together, and then we will start pinning all the tucks together.
Before I pinned and sewed all of my tucks together, I first needed to sew the side seams of both tiers of my skirt together. So here I am sewing the side seams for the bottom tier of my skirt together. I'm just using my standard 5/8 inch seam allowance, and then I'm going to do the same for the top tier. And as always, I finish my seams using my serger. If you have a serger, you can choose to use that as your seam finish, or the various different kinds of seam finishes available.
Okay, this next part is optional, but the original dress has like an eyelet trim on the bottom, which I personally really like. If you didn't want, I guess, your dress to be quite as frilly, you could leave this part off and just hem it and do all of the tucks. But before I actually sew all of my tucks together, I'm going to attach and sew this like really thick eyelet lace. It is about 3 inches wide, so it is going to add about 2.5 inches to the length of my skirt. I want this long anyways, so we're going to attach this and sew it to the 1.5 inches that I left at the bottom of the skirt. We'll finish the edges and then we'll come back and sew all of the tucks together. So that's a way to add kind of another like Victorian element to this skirt.
For the eyelet edged hem, I'm just pinning my eyelet lace all the way around the bottom. Now, one thing to note about this specific eyelet lace detail is that it's not a gathered lace kind of finish. A lot of lace that you get at stores is already gathered, but here, as you can see, there's no gathers. It's completely flat, which is what makes it perfect to fit around the bottom edge of my skirt. Now, to connect the 2 ends of this eyelet lace, I cut my eyelet lace about 1 inch longer so that it would overlap, and then what I'm going to do is match those 2 ends up and stitch them together with a little seam. Then I will just kind of press those flat in order to continue stitching around the entire circumference of my hem. So before we stitch the eyelet all the way around the hem of this skirt, we are first going to stitch those two ends of the eyelet together to connect them so that they make an entire piece of lace instead of two separate pieces. So I just stitch those together. I also folded in the raw edges and kind of stitched them down, and then I pressed the seam kind of open with my fingers so that I could continue just stitching all the way around the actual bottom of the skirt to attach the lace. I attached the eyelet lace with a 5/8 inch seam allowance, and then I also serged and finished those edges. After I finished sewing the eyelet to the bottom of the skirt, it was now time to work on sewing my first row of tucks. These are the tucks that are going to be 2.5 inches wide, so the section that we are folding in half is 5 inches wide across. So when you fold it in half, you are going to be matching up those lines that are drawn. So here, making sure to match up my lines, I'm just sticking my pin through, and if my pin intersects and goes through both lines, I know that it is evenly matched. And after I finish pinning that first 2-inch fold, I am then going to sew all the way around, following the line that I have drawn. So making sure to have those lines visible is what's going to make sewing all of these tucks so much more helpful. And again, the reason that I didn't freak out drawing actual lines on this white fabric is because my pin will disappear with the heat of my iron, which is super helpful.
Okay, so I sewed the first tuck, which is the one that's 2.5 inches, and when I folded it over, my little eyelet lace was not visible. I should have left probably like 1.5 inches at the bottom of my skirt. So I'm seam ripping my lace off. I'm going to extend the raw edge bottom of my skirt so that whenever I actually do sew my eyelet, it'll be more visible on the bottom. So there's that. All right, so I extended the bottom by 2 inches. So if you make this skirt the first tuck, you need to draw the bottom line for it like 2.5 inches from the bottom and not just like 1/2 inch like I did, because that's not enough. So 2.5 inches from the bottom, make the first tuck so that if you do put the eyelet, it won't be hidden.
Alright, after figuring out the issue of needing to extend the bottom of my skirt, I'm moving on to my second row of tucks. This row of tucks is 2 inches wide, so we are working with a 4-inch section, and I'm just going to fold that in half, and again, make sure to match up those lines on both sides, so if my pin intersects with both lines, then I know it's matched up properly. You can also draw a line down the center of the section, so that when you fold it in half, you're actually just folding along a line, and that is super helpful as well. After pinning my second row of tucks, I moved on to pin the last and third row, which is just going to be 1 inch. This is mainly done off camera, but I went ahead and pinned it, and then I am sewing it. So after I finished the second and the third row of tucks, getting those pinned, I just moved back to my sewing machine, and I'm just going to sew straight lines all the way around my skirt over those lines that I had drawn to complete those tucks.
Alright, finally finished the skirt tucks. So I extended the bottom, and it ended up being perfect to have the little eyelet. Then we have the 2.5 section, 2-inch section, and 1 inch. Looking pretty good. So now I just need to work on the top section of the skirt. Okay, so I was going to start sewing and pinning the tucks for the top section of the skirt, but I think I'm actually going to extend it and make it wider by about 3 or 4 inches. Nothing's wrong with this. It would just be more fitted and not quite as flowy as the original skirt, which I don't mind because I think a fitted top section of this specific shape of skirt is actually really flattering, but I feel like it's not going to give me the look that I want. So anyways, this is what this looks like. So if I were to have it at my waist, it would fit like up here at my waist. And as you can see, it's pretty fitted around like my hips, which isn't bad. Again, I think that would be a really flattering skirt, but I want this to have a little bit more movement since the original skirt does. So we're going to extend it and then resew the tucks and the new pieces. So note to self, I think I said that you would take your waist circumference and add 6, add 9 extra inches. I'll have to make sure that I add that note in that section of the video at the very beginning. Okay, once again, we figured out some issues and we are moving on. That tends to just be the theme of my sewing tutorials, figuring out along the way, and I am showing you all the real behind the scenes that goes into these sewing projects. So we are working on the top tier of our skirt. This top tier is only going to have 2 tucks. They are each just in ½ an inch wide. So the sections that we are going to be folding in half are 1 inch. And I did draw a line down the center of that 1 inch section. So essentially folding them is so much easier because all I have to do is fold along the line that is in the center. So it made it much quicker to actually fold and pin these tucks, so I highly recommend. I decided to pin both of these at the same time so that when I'm at my sewing machine I could just sew both rows of tucks without having to go back and forth pinning and sewing. And once again, in order to sew these tucks, I'm simply following the lines that I have drawn. Honestly, these lines saved me with sewing all of these tucks because otherwise I think I would have gone crazy. I don't know how people in like Victorian England did this, and they also sewed it all by hand, which is just absolutely wild. I'm so thankful for sewing machines. Alright, I ironed the ½ an inch tucks for the top portion of the skirt. And we have about 1 inch left. This is what's going to be attached to the gathers of the bottom section of the skirt. I do kind of wish I had made this like ½ an inch longer, just so the gathers of the skirt wouldn't come completely under this tuck, but I think we're just gonna have to make do and work with it. If you wanted, you could add another tuck to the top of here. I'm kind of thinking of doing a really tiny one just to add a little bit more dimension. And then what's left of the top, I'm going to fold down 1/4 and then 1 inch to the inside to make the waistband. And this will kind of hit very shortly on like the bottom section of my torso right under my waist and not go down quite as long. All right, I'm gonna try the top portion of the skirt on before I attach it to the bottom section of the skirt just to make sure it's the length that I want it. Again, I extended it by 3 or 4 inches. And so I think that's going to fit way better now. It's not quite as crazy tight. Okay, so then if my waistband is going to be 1 inch wide elastic, it's essentially gonna hit like right here, kind of. So the top portion of the skirt kind of hits where I want it. I think if I had made this a bit longer, I would probably have added a 3rd tuck. I just feel like a 3rd tuck would look better, and I think the original skirt has like 4 really tiny tucks. But I think we're just going to leave it as is and call it a day. If I did another tuck, it would shorten it. I think just more than I want it to shorten. So anyways, those are all like style details that you can adjust on your own. Moving on to the waistband of the skirt. For this waistband, I am going to fold over the top edge 1 1/4 inch, but I folded over the raw edge 1/4 of an inch before I then folded it 1 1/4 inch. And the reason why I'm doing 1 1/4 inch is because I'm going to use a 1 inch elastic. And if I actually just folded it 1 inch, my elastic was probably going to like fold in half and not have enough room. So I always like to give my elastic a little bit of wiggle room with my seam allowance on the bottom of my waistbands. Once that is ironed down and pinned, I took it over to my sewing machine and I'm just sewing right on the edge of where I folded it over 1 1/4 inch. And I also made sure to leave an opening at the back of my skirt so that I could put my elastic in. Alright, all the tucks are sewn into the skirt, so now I just need to add the basting stitch around the waist to gather it and attach the top of the skirt to the bottom of the skirt. And I guess that's like the moment of truth to see if everything even works. But I think it will, and I don't actually think it's going to look too bad. Okay, so my basting stitches in off camera. If you want to learn how to gather, I do have a little short tutorial on my channel all about gathering. But after I sewed my basting stitches in, I roughly gathered my skirt to be the general kind of width of my top tier, and then I'm just going to space out those gathers to make sure they're really nice and evenly placed around the skirt so that no area has more gathers than the other. After they are all spaced out, I'm going to flip my bottom tier inside out so that my seams are like on the outside, and I do this so that I can take my top tier and place it on the inside of my skirt so that it is all right sides together. This is going to allow me to match up the side seams of both tiers and then pin my gathers around the top tier of the skirt. And once I have pinned my bottom tier to my top tier, I'm just going to sew all the way around those pins. I feel like by the time this video tutorial is done, it's going to be like so all over the place. You won't even be able to follow it and make your own, because I have made so many tweaks along the way. I actually made like a mock-up of this without all of the tucks, just with like the top section and the bottom of the skirt in like a yellow fabric to see if like the shape and the fit was what I wanted before I even made this skirt, because I knew that like all of the tucks, once they were sewn, there's not a lot of leeway to make adjustments. And even still, we made adjustments in this. So anyways, everything actually did end up turning out pretty well. I gathered the skirt, attached it to the top, and it actually looks really good. I did, however, decide to add one more little tuck to the top section that's about like 1/4 of an inch. So by the time it's sewn together, we only took away about 1/2 inch of fabric, so it actually didn't alter like the fit and the length of the top tier all too much. I'll show you what it looks like. I'm actually really glad that I added it, because now there's 3 little tucks at the top and then 3 larger tucks at the bottom, and I feel like it just evens it out more and adds a little bit more of that kind of Victorian detail. Again, especially because the original DOEN dress has like 4 little tucks at the top and then like 4 larger tucks at the bottom. I just scaled mine down to 3. But anyways, this is what it looks like. Okay, so like I said, I added a 3rd tuck to the top. So this is the 3rd one that I added. That's a lot smaller. It would have been nice to probably make all 3 of these different sizes, since at the bottom they're all different sizes. But I actually don't think it's that big of a deal, and I'm really glad that I added this little tuck. If you didn't want the larger 1/2 inch tucks, you could just do 3 or 4 1/4 of an inch. So that is definitely an idea. All of the gathers actually knit up really well, and the length for this last tuck actually is like perfect with how the skirt was attached. And then we have all the tucks at the bottom, which honestly are just so beautiful. I'm starting to realize that the old-fashioned, like historical construction details like these tucks, which I keep calling them tucks, I don't even know what the actual name for them is. But anyways, these like old-fashioned construction details are honestly so beautiful, and I think that's why I just really love this skirt. So anyways, there's all of that. Just have to add elastic to the waist. Alright, now it's time to put the elastic in the waistband of the skirt. I really need to film a tutorial about like how to specifically cut elastic to fit you, and then how to actually put it into the waistband of skirts, because I feel like I just gloss over that in my tutorials. But anyways, the short synopsis of it is I just wrap the elastic around my waist, give it a little stretch to wherever it's comfortable, cut it about 1 inch longer, put a safety pin in the end of it, feed it through the waistband of my skirt, make sure I don't pull the tail through, so I still have tails at the end. I overlap them. I'm going to sew that overlap section together, then I'm going to pull it back into my waistband and sew the hole closed. Okay, so I finished my skirt about 2 days ago, and I didn't film the reveal that day because it was getting late in the day, and also the weather wasn't too great. And then the next day, Wisconsin decided that it was full-blown winter with like a miniature blizzard and snow everywhere. Like, it's literally just pure white outside, like all the snow, which makes it like really hard to film a reveal for a white skirt outside if there's snow everywhere, because it's going to blend in. It's also going to be cold, so I'm waiting to see if it melts a little bit by like Friday so I can film the reveal. Otherwise we might just push this back, or we'll just film in the barn. I've done that before. So anyways, the skirt is done. I actually am working on a pair of like pants to wear underneath it. Some might call them bloomers, some might call them pantaloons. They're really kind of like Victorian pantaloons, honestly. Anyways, so that will also be kind of a warmth addition. So I will probably wear those in the reveal and show them to you. I didn't film a tutorial for them, obviously, but pretty easy to make. Just a regular like pants pattern. And then we did the tucks at the bottom. So anyways, the skirt is done. It turned out so good, like literal perfection. I love it so much. I want to make it in some different colors, and I'm so excited to share with you all. We're waiting to see when we can film the reveal because it's winter outside right now. Not that the Victorians didn't like deal with this, but anyways, that's the update. Okay, so I've been waiting for the weather to kind of clear up a little bit before I try to go and film the reveal with like all snow white in the background, and today is the day, so I'm gonna head out and film the reveal for this skirt. I'm so excited for all to see it. I also decided I'm not gonna wear like the pantaloon bloomers that I made with the skirt and the reveal, so I'm going to show you how they turned out in case you want to make your own. I created mine and got inspired to make them from this brand that I saw just pop up as an ad on my Instagram. This is what they look like, this is the brand, and so I thought they would just be a really fun kind of pair of pants to wear in the spring and the summer, either underdresses or like with another cute blouse or a sweater, again kind of channeling that more like historical fashion but a modern twist kind of vibe. So anyways, here's what the pants look like actually on me, and then I'm gonna put the skirt on for the reveal. Okay, I'm not realizing that it's like impossible to film these pants in the bottom of them, so let's reconfigure the camera. Okay, maybe this is a bit better, we'll see. Hey, now you can see the bottom of them. I love a good like flowy ruffly bottom pant, and so these are fun because they have the tucks in them like my skirt, and so they kind of have that fun vibe. I didn't put pockets in these, but they're really cute with this sweater. Disregard my farm shoes. So yeah, I could wear these under my skirt and make it like a Raggedy Ann Victorian doll moment. But I just thought they were really cute, and so now I'm gonna show you how the skirt turned out, so stay tuned. Alright, what do we think? I am so obsessed with how this skirt turns out. Honestly, every sewing project that I put out into the world here on YouTube, I'm usually obsessed with. But this specific skirt, I've just been dreaming up, and seeing it come to light has been so fun. I also love how I styled it in this video. And speaking of styling, these ballet flats are my new obsession. I was sent them from a brand called 7 or 9. They have this patented air foam technology, and they are literally the comfiest pair of shoes I have ever put on. I am going to be wearing these nonstop this spring, and I thought they were just the perfect way to finish out this outfit with a fun little red sweater, a red bow, just all the classic details. I'm just loving everything about this. There's the snow right back there. Some of it's melted, but there's still some dripping from the roofs now. I just want to say thank you to all of you who watched my video. As always, it means the world to me that you tune in, watch my sewing tutorials and any videos that I put out, and I hope that as always you are inspired by this tutorial. Try to make the skirt for yourself. If you do, definitely tag me on social media so that I can see it and share it and ooh and ah and celebrate over a fun creative project. Drop a comment down below and let me know your favorite part about this video, or if you're planning on making the skirt for yourself. And as always, make sure to tune in next time for my new video. So make sure you're subscribed to my channel and give this video a thumbs up. Thanks for watching. Bye.